There's no room for two people's realities in a narcissistic relationship. Always keep that in mind. These relationships work as long as they can dominate and control you. And once you challenge that dynamic, it cannot work. So the short answer to that is they will blow up or they will leave. We're going to continue talking about those red flags for narcissism. Remember, red flags, early detection system. Pay attention. Have you ever noticed this happen with somebody who's narcissistic? They get bent out of shape when they realize that they're not special. And again, this red flag series is meant to be a way, especially in a new narcissistic relationship, to pay attention to patterns and learn about patterns that are telling you early on that this relationship could be a problem. Now, I'm going to say a quote. I've said it, I think, a couple of times on this channel. I'm going to say it again. It's actually from the movie The Incredibles, so not exactly high culture. But I think there are always some interesting gems in those damned Pixar films, which I had to watch for years. At one point, there's a sort of sad character in The Incredibles named Syndrome. And he says something to the general effect of, if everyone is special, then no one is. And it was interesting. Syndrome, the character, had some of the feel of a vulnerable narcissist. He wanted to be a superhero, so I think he tried to make some special boots or something like that to have superpowers, but the actual superheroes had inborn superpowers, and he was forever resentful of not being seen for his superness and the privileges the super people had, and he just got more and more angry and kind of made a mess out of everything with his sort of quiet rage. The line stuck with me, if everyone's special, then no one is, because obviously one from a sort of happy rainbow place could argue, or joyful unicorn place could argue that everyone is special and unique. But perhaps maybe the true anti-narcissist line is, even if everyone is in their own way special, everyone should be treated the same and subjected to the rules in the same way. Now, the core of entitlement, and going one step further, entitlement is one of the cores of narcissism, is that someone believes that they are special. In fact, more special than others, and as a result, they should be accorded certain privileges that other people don't get. And that may mean that they believe the rules apply differentially to them. They should not be punished if they do bad things the same way others should be punished if they do those bad things, or the rules should apply to other people but not to them. There is an inherent hypocrisy and delusion built into entitlement. When a narcissistic person's entitlement gets challenged and a narcissist is not being seen as special, then shame and inadequacy get activated, and rage always follows. So as a red flag, this idea of not being special can come out in a few ways. Some of this resonates with another concept that we've already talked about as being a red flag for narcissism, which is their inability to cope and their reactivity in situations in which they are frustrated or disappointed or stressed. At the time those things happen, it's a sort of reminder that they aren't special, right? Because only ordinary people get frustrated. I shouldn't have to put up with that. But the red flag of not being special, especially in the earlier phases of a relationship, can come out in a variety of ways. For example, you're in a friendship or relationship, the ways it can come up with is that they have to wait in a line with everyone else, even when they are a regular or a VIP at a given business or venue. When they don't get to board an airplane ahead of other passengers. When they don't get the special labeled parking spot right in front of the building. When they're not able to get into the nightclub or other hot spot that has some sort of person at the door deciding who is getting in or not. When I am talking about special, I'm not talking about the specialness that is related to human uniqueness, or, for example, doing something that's very special and kind, like, I don't know, like making someone a special homemade birthday cake. By special, I mean it the way narcissistic people see it. That they are so special that they should get special privileges and perks that other people don't get. I guess the other people don't get to get them because they're not so special. So when that specialness balloon gets popped because the narcissists are treated like everyone else, look out. The things that follow tend to be rage, irritability, reactivity, maybe all kinds of other sort of noisy, clangy, reactive behaviors. Things like, I'm going to write a terrible review online about you. I'm going to put something on social media. Or some of those other kinds of dominant, shaming, posturing behaviors. Things like, when I'm done, you're going to be out of business because nobody's ever going to want to come here again. Or they will threaten to file grievances or lawsuits to punish you because they weren't treated as though they are special. This whole idea of being special, red flag, can also be activated in a different direction if they feel someone is being seen as more special than them. As you know, I'm based in Los Angeles, the celebrity mothership, and so people's belief in their specialness is on steroids in LA. A garden variety narcissist who may not be famous, but a little famous, may watch a much more famous or renowned or notorious person getting the VIP treatment somewhere, being quickly ushered into the restaurant, getting the best table in that place or a private table, lots of people taking pictures of them. And the narcissistic person watching this scene unfold may actually literally have a visceral reaction to watching someone else be the special one. And it doesn't even have to be on this grandiose scale. It may be that in line at that business where the narcissistic person regularly goes to do whatever, then they're being made to stand in line. But to watch that someone else who may be more important to the business owner or for some other reason, someone else actually does get to jump the line. Again, what you're often likely to see is a rage fireworks show when that happens, either passive-aggressive rage or overt rage. It's almost a 1-2 punch. Not only is the narcissistic person seeing that they are not the special one, but on top of that, it turns out someone else is. Now, in my life, for a variety of reasons, I have to fly a lot. I used to do it more before the pandemic, but even during the pandemic, I still had to fly a lot. And for me, airports are like narcissism laboratories. Entitlement is always on display. How people board the aircraft, how they store their bags once they get on the aircraft, how they manage their armrests and the leaning of the seats, how they behaved when they didn't get their way on the airplane or when they're boarding the airplane. And how they behave in the rushed experience of the airport or in the rather tight, uncomfortable confines of the airplane. When people's specialness was not being recognized, then that is when you'd see more of this angry behavior emerging. There's actually very interesting research out there that shows that when people have to walk through the first class cabin to get to the coach cabin, that there are more incidents of air rage on those flights than if the coach passengers board right into the coach cabin. My guess is that those folks who are ragefully acting out on flights, probably narcissistic types, if they saw that others had bigger seats and better stuff, then their "you're not the special one" trigger gets activated, and then they go off on their fellow coach passengers. Red flag. Now, to identify this red flag, look for things in a person like them bristling at rules that everyone else has to follow, having contempt for rules that have been set, and always trying to find a way to work around those rules or skirt them or bend them or even break them. Asking to speak to the manager or other authority figure if they aren't getting their way. A person's volume rising as they try to get their specialness seen, or a lot of sullen, clangy rage if they're not being seen. Also pay attention to how they may be reacting to someone else getting special treatment. Is there anger, disparagement, contempt, or a disproportionate reactivity if they see someone else getting better treatment than them. If the rules are bent for everyone, then why should we even have them? We are definitely in an era of entitlement where everyone thinks that the rules are great for everyone else, just not for themselves. And if we do that, that's called anarchy. But the bad behavior that can follow confirmation that in a given situation that someone is not special can be a very important red flag to pay attention to. So if you're in a new kind of friendship or relationship and you see that somebody gets bent out of shape when they're not the special one, file that away. You probably might be dealing with a narcissistic situation. What's the best way to reject a narcissist? So this is one of those subtle videos that came to me in the middle of the night, as they often do, and I jotted it down on a piece of paper. So you're not going to like this video because it's going to be like, oh, this is so feel good, but it's not really. What's the best way to reject a narcissist? Accept yourself. Now, I know that sounds like something cutesy that belongs on a cute Instagram post, but let me break it down before you just tune out. Narcissistic abuse works because they, in an almost parasitic way, overtake your sense of identity, your sense of self, your preferences, and you. And because of that, by the end of the relationship, you're basically sort of living in their service, walking on eggshells to avoid setting them off, convincing yourself that you do like the same things as them to avoid conflict, accepting the toxic conditions of the relationship and justifying it, and clipping away at your ambitions. Basically, to make the relationship work, you stop being you. So, what if you didn't? What if you held your ground on being you? If you do it early enough, the relationship simply won't work if it's a new relationship. They will get tired of not being able to dominate you. Now, what if you try to do this in an existing relationship? It's not going to be so easy because you're going to be baited, gaslighted, devalued, dismissed, invalidated, and mocked, and you'd have to really white knuckle that. And then you have to be prepared for rejection and abandonment because they're not going to, odds are that they're not going to stick around. But if you're willing to have that happen for them to go, then accepting yourself is actually the healthiest path forward. Think about it. If they tell you that you are crazy or remembering things wrong or lying or invalidating or gaslighting, you may say, I'm not listening to that. It's not an accurate characterization of me. Then they would mock you. And you could say, nah, you know what, this exchange is disrespectful, and then step away. They will fume, they will rage, they will tantrum, and this will go on for a while. They may criticize what you do, or what you wear, or what you eat, or what you watch, and you may say, well, no, I think I did that well, or I like this dress, or I love this kind of food, and this is a great show. You accept you. You don't try to defend it. You don't try to engage with them. You accept what it is, what you like, what you're about. Now, I know that this is basically the triple black diamond of taking on a narcissist. And you're just a beginning skier because most of us don't know how to accept ourselves after multiple stints of narcissistic abuse. We still doubt ourselves. But at a minimum, we know if we like a TV show or we know if we like the taste of a particular food. Accepting ourselves means not getting into an argument about what we know. If they say the sky is green, then you say, enjoy that, that sounds pretty, and then you let it go. If you experienced narcissistic abuse as a child, this is really hard. It can feel pretty damn near impossible because the first phase of healing is finding you, often for the first time, not shaming who you are or rejecting yourself or feeling like you have to shapeshift to be loved. That takes a minute. But as you get better at it, you find that as you accept yourself more, that narcissistic family or those narcissistic family members become less interested in you and you may get cut out of the system. Actively rejecting them is not easy. It means fights and conflict that can get really cruel and uncomfortable. Accepting yourself is a far more serene and self-preserving path to take that will pay dividends. It's sad that the best way to dump them is to accept you, but it's almost like repellent to them. You accepting you doesn't work for them. So try it and see how it works out for you. And the good thing is, like I said, the ultimate dividend is you don't have to actively reject them. That can feel painful and difficult. It may not be in line with who you view yourself with as an empathic, compassionate person. But accepting yourself is always a good way to go. But be prepared. The more of it you do, the more likely they are to either mock you or cut bait. So let's face it, everyone in toxic relationships is told one thing: set boundaries, right? In fact, everyone in every relationship is told to set boundaries in all of their relationships, family relationships, intimate relationships, workplaces, relationships, friendships, right? Boundaries is a big issue, right? Boundaries means being clear on issues ranging from time to communication to sex, anything, to give ourselves permission to set a line, to feel safe, and to communicate that line, right? I'm guilty of this, right? It's one of even the elements of healing I put out there is giving the guidance that you should attempt to set boundaries in a narcissistic relationship. In some ways, it's a test. And once you see the narcissistic person will ignore or continue to violate the boundaries, please view that as a bit of a wake-up call. I know that the boundaries won't work, but many people want to rule everything out before they think a toxic relationship is absolutely done. So you set the boundaries. You actually may get stronger. You might get stronger through therapy, maybe because you've been educating yourself about narcissism. Maybe you just get stronger from sheer exasperation, but you get stronger, you follow the guidance, and you really finally do it. You set the boundaries. And then, you know what the narcissist does? They call you controlling. I hear this over and over again from people who attempt to set boundaries in their narcissistic relationships. For years, they didn't set boundaries in these relationships because they were confused, or they blamed themselves, or they did not understand what they were dealing with. Some folks did not set them because they just didn't know how to set them. I mean, let's face it, the vast majority of people are not taught how to set boundaries in childhood. And if you had a narcissistic parent, then forget about it. You were never given permission to set boundaries. And if you did, you would have faced rage and punishment. And if you didn't even get to see boundaries being set, maybe even by your other parent or within the family system, when you didn't see them being enacted, it's hard to do something that you were never taught or that you were never given permission to do. But once you set the boundaries anywhere, it may be directly with the narcissistic person, it may be with someone or something else, and your boundary setting is observed by the narcissistic and by a narcissistic person in your life. But when your boundaries are observed, you setting boundaries is observed by a narcissistic person, they will likely tell you that you're being controlling. And obviously that's a bit of a projection. So let's lay this out as a bit of a scenario, right? You are in a narcissistic relationship. Let's say it's with a parent, right? But you can substitute anyone in there. The parent expects you in a very entitled manner to keep doing things for them as soon as they ask you to do them. It is eating into your time and making your life difficult, and you're very busy. You have tried in gentle and appropriate ways to push them off, tried to get siblings to help, or done what they needed in a rush. But more often than not, you do what they need to get done, but you're getting more resentful. Finally, one day, after taking so much time to do the many frivolous things that the narcissistic parent expects you to do, when they expect you to do them,
with little awareness of how this is affecting you. You tell the parent, hey, I can't do this every day. I can do these things like once a week and that's it. Anything else is going to just have to wait till the next week. And please also don't call me during work hours because it's quite disruptive. And then you do that, good boundaries, and the parent accuses you of being controlling, cold, and maybe even manipulative. It can be quite startling to have someone tell you that you are controlling after years of walking on eggshells and then finally making clear what you would think would be clear to any self-aware person. But there's the rub. They aren't self-aware. That's the issue. You, me, all of us, we all exist at their need and at their whim. They are delusional enough to think that we are the problem, that they are always right, and that we have no right to set a boundary. And if we are, then we're being controlling. Narcissistic people pathologize and shame qualities in others, which make their lives more difficult or pick away at their sense of grandiosity and entitlement. If they are the greatest and all powerful, well, then how could somebody actually set boundaries on them? I mean, nobody sets boundaries with the king, right? If you from an early age saw the message that setting boundaries was a bad thing, and then attempted to set boundaries and are then told that you are being controlling, it can discourage you from wanting to set them or from setting them at all. Narcissistic people find that shaming and calling you crazy works. And these comments often will stop you from engaging in the behavior that's inconveniencing them. So it's a really, really clever manipulation, isn't it? Setting boundaries with narcissistic folks will not result in them changing their behavior or honoring the boundaries, but it will perhaps result in you opening your eyes wider to what you're seeing. I know that some people don't set them because they are afraid of the narcissistic person's rage, or they are afraid of losing the narcissistic person from their life. The narcissistic relationship is often about all of us holding back because we are afraid they will disappear if we ask too much or set a boundary. That is your work because this is an unhealthy space. And for all of us to work on unpacking our trauma bonds to help diminish the power of the narcissistic folks in our lives. As a result, many people in narcissistic relationships, often in order to survive, will find themselves immersed in denial. By not setting boundaries, you don't then have to see how bad the narcissistic relationship is. But once you do set the boundary and witness their reaction, it's a painful and stark reminder of how dysfunctional the relationship is. It can be easier to not set the boundaries at all and remain in denial. Because once you set the boundaries and see what it really is about, the grief can be overwhelming. But that, in the long run, is not good for you. So with boundary setting, start small. Start practicing boundary setting with the healthier people in your life who will be willing to respect the boundaries, and then start building up those boundaries in other areas. It can be painful to witness what happens in the relationships when you do set boundaries. But even if you stay, at least you will do so with your eyes wide open and not believing that this is going to change. And no, setting an appropriate boundary is not controlling, no matter what they say to you. So here's a question. What do you think narcissistic people do once they lose control of you? Drop your answers in the comments. I think some of you already know the answer to this because you're living it. The primary dynamics that drive a narcissistic person in a relationship are power, control, and domination.
And the narcissistic person uses the relationship as a source of validation. If those needs are not being met or cannot be achieved, that is a contributor to the volatility of these relationships. So, if you are in a relationship with a narcissistic person and do get more power or control or exert your autonomy, the narcissistic person is going to react badly. So here's some examples of this. One could be that you're the adult child of a narcissistic parent and you no longer need them for money or housing, or you make your own way in the world and they were using money to control you. You are in a narcissistic relationship and you get a promotion or a new job that may put you in a more powerful or well-paid position. Or you leave an abusive, tyrannical, narcissistic boss to take another job or start your own venture where they cannot control you in the day-to-day anymore. The responses to this can vary. In some cases, you will see the narcissistic person try to keep you small, tell you that you're probably going to fail, or that you're kidding yourself if you think you will be able to pull this new thing off, or that this success of yours is temporary or fleeting, or that you better be careful what you wish for because it may all be a big disappointment and won't you feel foolish when it all falls apart. In some cases, you will see that vulnerable victimization we so often see in narcissism. Oh, woe is me, will say the narcissist. Everything goes your way. I guess you won't need me anymore. I guess my life has just been so unlucky. Things come really easily to you. I always have to work hard for everything I get. That kind of thing. In other cases, you may experience abandonment. They may want to leave, say they want to leave the relationship and cut you off, give you the silent treatment, or even imply that maybe this relationship won't work because you will be so busy in your new job. Or they may go full on revenge on you. This may be, for example, a smear campaign by that tyrannical boss who tries to badmouth you and badmouth your new endeavor, or talking with other people about you and saying bad things, or holding back on a piece of information that you may need. They will actively try to sabotage you. Remember what healing is about in these relationships. Finally crawling out of the subjugated space that you had to remain in to keep this relationship going. Silencing yourself, making yourself smaller, pretty much clipping your own wings, not individuating or developing your own autonomy of any kind. But healing also means, as you individuate, that you will incur the wrath, displeasure, or frank abandonment by the narcissist. Your growth is not something that the narcissistic person can tolerate, especially because it means they're going to lose their power and their control. So when you slowly slip out of their control, you become an object of contempt. You stop being supply. You're a headache. And they want to put you back in your subjugated place. They want you in the service of their ego, not growing as an individual yourself. Narcissistic people do not like relationships that they cannot control, which is often why they are so focused on getting into leadership positions. By being in charge, they can control. And that could be everything from being the shift manager at a fast food restaurant to the CEO of a corporation. It's all about control. Might be small scale, might be big scale, but it's control. When a narcissistic person senses that they are losing control of you, you can expect this entire litany of reactions, and they may shapeshift and shift strategies too. Some vindictiveness, then victimhood, then abandonment. It can be a painful realization and a difficult part of healing
that your growth, your advancement, your aspiration, you simply becoming you, was never going to be allowed in this relationship. You may have suspected it, but when it really happens, you see it. Many people who are very trauma bonded in these relationships know that the implicit message is that if you grow, they will leave. And the fears that go along with it means that many people in narcissistic relationships have shrunk themselves for years to make it work. Because no, they will be pissed off, and then they will continue to berate you or abandon you if you dare ever get out of their controlling grip. There's no room for two people's realities in a narcissistic relationship. Always keep that in mind. These relationships work as long as they can dominate and control you. And once you challenge that dynamic, it cannot work. So the short answer to that is they will blow up or they will leave. But that idea of either facing the rage or facing the abandonment is so overwhelming for so many people in a narcissistic relationship that even though it's not intentional, that you may find yourself holding yourself back and not expanding yourself to all the full potential that you have because of that fear and because the narcissistic person will not lose control of you, and you might feel too scared of what will happen if you did. My only hope for you someday is that you do.
When we play out the usual narcissistic relationship cycle, idealization, devaluation, discarding, and hoovering, it can look like the narcissist is fully in control. It feels like the narcissistic person is the one pulling the strings, doing the love bombing, engaging in seduction, or doing the deep dive into pseudo-empathy. And once they have you, they start getting uninterested in you, right? They devalue you. It's their contempt at the point they have you and their incapacity for intimacy. The chase is typically the most engaging part of a relationship for a narcissistic person. And then, oftentimes, it's them who decides to leave, or at least threatens to leave. But sometimes, and I would argue far more often than you would think, people leave narcissists. And in fact, as we get more awareness of narcissism and narcissistic abuse, I think people are actually leaving narcissistic relationships more often than we think, because people are recognizing that these patterns are probably not going to change. When you leave a narcissistic relationship, in general, the narcissist does not like it. It means that they have lost control of the narrative and, frankly, lost control in general. It means that they're going to be losing validation, losing whatever conveniences you brought to their life, and losing power. Their responses to being left by you or being left by anyone will range from rage to mockery, you really think you're going to make it without me, to seeming indifference. But the piece that many people forget about is that people who are quite narcissistic or have narcissistic personality styles are very vulnerable to feelings of abandonment. We often view abandonment in line with more sort of fragile or despairing personality patterns or mental health issues. We think that the narcissist is too cold for that. Abandonment, though, is also a bit of an interpretation issue. Abandonment can even be experienced when somebody just goes away on a trip or goes to work or just goes home for a little while. Just that moment of separation activates something quite primal in people who are narcissistic. It's not true that narcissists are immune to abandonment. For a variety of nuanced psychological issues, narcissists do not regulate abandonment well. Some of this relates to work that comes from the world of attachment theories, which hold that people who have narcissistic personalities are likely to have attachment styles that are characterized by anxious, disorganized, or avoidant patterns. As a result, it can be very, very difficult at a primitive level for a narcissistic individual to safely put roots down with another person. For people with these kinds of attachment styles, the moment of departure is always very difficult for them. It activates all that attachment stuff. Now, some of you in relationships that are characterized by narcissistic patterns, or who have been in these patterns in these relationships in the past, you may recognize this pattern. Let's say in a narcissistic relationship, you may need to have to be away from each other for a few days or a few weeks, a business trip or some other travel, a work thing, a family issue that needs to be dealt with. And the day of departure is getting closer and closer. You will notice that things will get more and more tense in your relationship, and the narcissist will get more and more agitated. They will start arguing with you about small things. The relationship will just feel more difficult. You may feel frustrated because you want your last few days or hours with this person to be pleasant, but the more you try, the worse they behave. And you may get into a blowout battle on the way to the airport or whatever as you get to the hour of departure. A similar pattern can arise when you see them again when they get back from the trip or when you get back from the trip. Instead of falling into each other's arms with each other, you may find that your narcissistic partner or narcissistic person may be tentative, almost detached, and distant. These patterns are not uncommon in people who have these attachment issues, anxious or avoidant or disorganized attachments. And all of this is consistent with the idea that that upcoming departure starts triggering those primitive abandonment feelings, and the coming back together is actually kind of characterized by anger. I can't believe you left me in the first place. And this happens even if it's the narcissist who is the one leaving on the trip. Doesn't matter who's going. It's that you guys are parting ways for a little while. And all of this is because abandonment is a very primitive experience. It's not an adult goodbye, see you later, I'll call you when I get there, and you feel confident that you will see them later. It's the terror a baby feels because it doesn't understand that their caregiver is something separate from them, and they can't understand what happens when that person leaves the room. It's like a part of them goes. It's primitive, and the narcissistic person as an adult is obviously not in touch with this. As a result, when somebody in an adult relationship with them is going away or they're going away for hours, days, maybe in some cases forever, internally, they experience it as a cataclysm. Now, people with antagonistic personalities are high in a quality called rejection sensitivity. The experience of rejection for them is emotionally unsettling, and they are often quite hyper-reactive in the face of any kind of rejection, even someone not wanting to come to their house for dinner. This is sort of a lower grade level of abandonment fear. It may not be as big, but that rejection sensitivity can explain some of the excessive reactivity that rises in any form of criticism or, again, not showing up. You say, I can't come to lunch today. They may interpret that as a really primal loss of love or regard. Now, outwardly, despite all of this fragility, it's a different story. Remember, a person with a narcissistic personality does not like to look weak to other people, so they will deny the impact of these departures and are actually more likely to rage against you because you're the person who has activated these uncomfortable feelings they don't understand. Then they are going to be wanting to understand them. You may be so used to them being the controlling, dominant one in the relationship that you are surprised that they are becoming so fragile in the face of an upcoming or even possibly sort of threatening separation to them that doesn't even exist. And when you try to become sweet and soothe them, they may actually become more contemptuous because in some ways you're sort of bringing their fragility to light. Fears about abandonment and strong reactions against it are often considered to be a part of what is designated as what's traditionally been thought of as a borderline personality style. Abandonment and borderline personality are often viewed together. But the borderline and narcissistic personality styles are sort of closely related in terms of some of their origins. So the abandonment crises of the narcissistic personality, just theoretically, in light of the attachment stuff, does make sense. We just aren't expecting it with a narcissistic individual because we don't see the same levels of sort of despair and instability that we might see with, for example, more of a borderline style. The issue of abandonment can also explain hoovering. You may be wondering, if they're afraid of abandonment, why would a narcissist leave and then try to pull you back? And they might try to pull you back if you're the one who left, but why? Interestingly, narcissists will often leave relationships because sometimes when people are afraid of something, they try to get ahead of it. They try to abandon the other person first. It allows that person, the leaver, to control the narrative, to control the fear. It's like knowing when the scary part of the movie is going to come, rather than being startled by it. But after a person who tries to kind of get away or get ahead of the abandonment by pulling out themselves, there can be a sort of primitive attempt to work this through. Can I bring that person back? That disorganized approach, avoiding, go away, no, come back, no, go away, no, come back. That's the style that often characterizes narcissistic relationships. And that's where you often see the hoovering. And you may fall for it, and then the whole cycle starts again. Again, it's like the child that aggravates the mom does step away, and the child's like, I want to get mom back. The fear of abandonment shared by many narcissists is often related to the fear of losing validation, narcissistic supply, control, and then there's the activation of shame scripts around being rejected. And when you think of it that way, it may make more sense. But all of this adds to the roller coaster quality of any relationship with a narcissist. So that begs the question, what's the antidote to abandonment? How do any of us keep our abandonment fears at bay? By feeling secure and safe in the world. Now, how does a person get there if they didn't have healthy attachment experiences earlier in life? It comes down to therapy and doing the work of self-compassion, of self-reflection, of self-awareness, and recognizing that emotions are not scary. None of this comes easy to people with narcissistic personalities. And so for some of you, many of you didn't have early secure attachments, but you have been able to do the hard psychological work of helping yourself as an adult feel safer in the world. For a narcissistic individual, though, that is highly, highly unlikely. There will always be this sense of threat. And remember something I've said throughout these videos. Think of the narcissistic individual as somebody who feels a constant sense of threat from the world. They always feel like something is coming at them, right? And even when there's nothing coming at them, part of it is sort of what they're saying to themselves in their own head. And abandonment is pretty high on that list of threats a person with a narcissistic personality style feels. A great example of this would be some of you who've been in narcissistic marriages, you yourself would say, I don't want to get divorced. I don't believe in divorce. I want to stay married. I have to stay married. We have kids together. Our money is like this. It's my culture. It's my religion. Whatever your reasons are, you don't want a divorce. You're in a narcissistically abusive marriage, and one day you finally, you can't take it anymore. But in your relationship, throughout the relationship, something that is not unusual in a narcissistic marriage is that the narcissistic partner will threaten divorce. Threatening divorce or threatening to leave a relationship and not doing it is actually a form of gaslighting. It's a way to keep the other person on their toes so they fall in line with you because they think that, oh, if I don't fall in line with them, they're going to get up and leave. So it's not an uncommon gambit by a narcissist. Well, here's where it gets interesting. More often than you would know, the person in a narcissistically abusive marriage, especially the one who doesn't want to get divorced, will hear this threat over and over again. Oh, yeah, I'm going to divorce you. I'm going to call an attorney. I'm out of here. You, the non-narcissistic, I don't want this to happen. Okay, what do I need to do? One day you're like, I'm done. You want a divorce? Sounds great. I'll give you one. Then the narcissist will often say, oh, I didn't mean that. We could work on this. Boom. The abandonment script got activated. As long as they were running the narrative, they were the one who could threaten divorce, then they were in control of it, especially when they realized you didn't want it. But the day you give in and say, great, you want a divorce? I'm all in. Let's call this done. It is amazing how often the narcissist will say, whoa, what do you mean? That's what I mean about that abandonment always being sort of the baseline, sort of the back thrum to one of these relationships. So I hope that gives you some insight. It really speaks to some of the vulnerabilities inherent in this personality style. And if it happens to you, or happened to you, I'm hoping this gave you some clarity. Again, if you're new to this channel, please subscribe, join us. It's a great community, and look forward to seeing you again.